The message came in silence. No transmission, no frequency, just a sudden override of every sky-facing telescope on Earth. At precisely 3:17 UTC, all screens across observatories, satellites, and classified agencies across the globe blinked. Once, then displayed the same phrase in flawless English: "You are invited." The invitation had no coordinates, no authentication, no visible source. And yet, every astronomer, physicist, and Black Ops analyst knew it was real. Within days, the United Nations assembled a special delegation of scientists and linguists under a single, urgent directive: find out what "you are invited" means. But, before Earth could react further, the stars changed. A minor constellation, known to Earth as Lacerta, the lizard, suddenly blinked out of existence, replaced not by darkness, but by architecture from Earth's surface. It looked like a scaffold of light, billions of miles across, hexagonal, geometric, rotating, and inside it, stars, not behind it, but inside, trapped, displayed. It wasn't just Earth that noticed. The sudden appearance triggered gravitational ripples that reached out across the galaxy. Ships veered off course, warp gates flickered, ancient species stirred in hibernation chambers, and far across the Sagittarius arm, a single word pulsed through transdimensional space: market. Earth's invitation wasn't a courtesy, it was a test. Within a week, Earth's delegation was relocated to lunar orbit, where an impossibly ancient vessel waited, a ring-shaped craft suspended in gravity with no visible propulsion. When they entered, the ship translated thoughts, bypassed languages, and asked a single question: representatives of Earth, do you claim sentience and autonomy as a species? The diplomats hesitated. One of them, a professor of comparative philosophy, finally answered, yes. The ship surged forward instantly. No warning, no acceleration. One moment they were orbiting the moon, the next, they were in the market. Imagine a colosseum built by the gods, floating in the void between stars. Each arc, tower, and spire, designed by a different civilization, some liquid, some crystal, some entirely conceptual. There were balconies shaped like thoughts, staircases made of collapsed time, and walls grown from memory. At the center was the auction ring. Here, the rarest materials in the known universe were sold not for currency, but for consequence. To bid, you offered trade, secrets, planets, histories, the memory of your ancestors' final breath. Some species offered lifetimes, others offered extinction events. Everything was on the table. And this year, for the first time in a million cycles, Earth had a seat. The human delegation, 12 scientists, politicians, and translators, was given a translator sphere and a private booth made of neutral mass, unreflective, unremarkable, but undeniably present. They weren't expected to bid. Earth had no tradable technology, no planetary influence, no weapons. Their invitation was considered a curiosity. Some said it was a mistake, but that's when he arrived. Malik Grayson wasn't part of the delegation. Technically, he wasn't even cleared for off-world travel. He was a private citizen, billionaire, eccentric, owner of 22 biotech firms, 3 orbital habitats, and 1 defunct Mars terraforming project, and he had hacked the invitation. He appeared in the Earth booth, dressed in an iridescent suit stitched from carbon silk, a thin black visor covering his eyes. The delegation protested. Security tried to remove him, but the market responded before they could. A beam of silver light struck the center of the arena. A shape materialized. Not quite solid, not quite gas. It shimmered like molten crystal. The dreamer, the market whispered. Gasps echoed through alien dialects and species that did not use breath. The market had just offered something sacred, something ancient. A star, not just any star, but a presentient stellar entity, rumored to have thoughts, dreams, memory, It was unsellable, but it was on the block. Bidding began in moments. The Valtari sovereign offered the orbital shell of a dwarf moon, wrapped in psychic metal. The Kryn offered an extinct species preserved. Language Matrix. The Scare offered 1 million. Years of unspoken truce with the Hive Kingdom. Each bid sent waves of tension across the arena. Some races fainted from the strain. Others turned away, refusing to watch. This wasn't just an auction. It was an abomination. To own a sentient star was heresy, madness. Then Malik Grayson raised his hand. "I offer Earth's most precious resource," he said, his voice echoing across dimensions. The market paused. "What is that?" the Star Echo asked, translating, "For the auction ring." "Human attention," he said. "We will bind the dreamer to our story, our media, our art. Billions will look up and see it. Every poem, every war, every tragedy, every moment of history, we will fold it into the dreamer's name." The arena fell silent. No one had ever tried narrative as currency. Then, slowly, the dreamer pulsed once, accepted. Malik Grayson had bought a star, and Earth was now the owner of something every galactic civilization feared to touch. The delegation collapsed in disbelief. The market erupted into 1,000 languages of panic and fury. Species scrambled to leave. Entire booths vanished. Some civilizations went dark instantly, severing connections with the market for fear of contagion. The dreamer's orbit shifted. It moved, and above Earth, the night sky blinked. Where once there had been silence, now came whispers, not through radio, not through sound, but through dreams. People across the world began having visions, ancient memories, not their own. The feeling of being vast, molten, born in vacuum. Remembering when the universe was young, remembering betrayal, a promise made, and broken. Malik Grayson gave a press conference from orbit. "I bought it fair and square," he said. "You don't sell something like this and expect to take it back." One reporter, trembling, asked him why. Grayson smiled. "Because it asked me to," he said. "And because the galaxy needs to remember who we are." At that exact moment, 18 billion kilometers away, a Valtari strike fleet blinked into existence. 5 warships, shields raised, weapons hot. Their order: retrieve the dreamer, or destroy Earth. Trying as their engines ignited and space twisted under their mass, the dreamer pulsed again. A wave of gravity tore through the fleet. 3 ships vanished. 1 melted into itself. The last turned around and fled without explanation. Back on Earth, Grayson watched the footage with mild curiosity. "I told them," he murmured. "You don't own the dreamer." The rest of the delegation begged the UN to surrender the star, offer it back, apologize, beg for mercy. But Grayson had already signed it over, not to Earth, but to a company. DreamTech Inc., registered in the Cayman Belt, incorporated by proxy, legally recognized in 14 outer systems. Its owner, Malik Grayson, and, on the first page of the contract, under terms of ownership, there was only one line: the dreamer must not be interrupted. That night, every sleeping human dreamed of stars bleeding. The second night after the acquisition, Earth began to change. Not its climate, not its orbit, but its mind. It started small, in the dreams of artists, the sketches of children, the mutterings of sleep talkers, images pulsing, radiant, painful love, spiral suns, and whispering voids. People began painting stars with eyes. Galaxies curled inwards, drawn into pupil-like cores. Some claimed they could hear music subharmonics deep beneath. Language, like choirs singing in a black cathedral. The dreamer wasn't sleeping. It was learning. On the 6th day, 6 billion humans experienced the same vision. A white corridor, lined with mirrors that reflected not faces, but emotions. Rage, wonder, hunger. At the end of the hall, a black door. Behind it, breathing, not human, not monstrous. Something else. The world's governments assembled again. The Earth delegation, broken and stunned, met in an underground bunker beneath the Pacific. Malik Grayson wasn't invited. He arrived anyway, walking through walls, escorted by something that wasn't quite a person. It wore a business suit but shimmered like static. The delegation called it the Proxy. Grayson leaned against the wall, sipping a cup of synthetic whiskey. "You're all missing the point," he said. "The dreamer isn't speaking to us. We're speaking to it." The delegation's head, a woman named Dr. Elena Rowe, linguist, diplomat, and former atheist, stood. "It's affecting the collective consciousness," she said. "People are starting to connect telepathically. Thoughts are bleeding across cities. We've confirmed 3 suicides linked to overload empathy, and 1 birth, where the child spoke a complete sentence seconds after delivery." Grayson smirked. And it's unsustainable," she snapped. "You've infected the species with a god." He tilted his head. "Or woken up a part of us we've been suppressing." In the background, the Proxy whispered something into thin air. A screen flickered on. Footage from Paris, a mural, 50 meters tall, had appeared overnight. It wasn't painted, it had grown, alive and pulsing, made of living fiber and light, the face of the dreamer. People knelt before it, some screamed. Rose's hands trembled. "What are you doing?" Grayson sighed. "I'm scaling." That night, across 23 time zones, a new broadcast interrupted every feed on Earth. It was not made by any human agency. It was the dreamer. It spoke no language. It used faces, emotions, memories. Each person saw someone they once loved, once hated, once lost. The message was clear. The dreamer was processing us the next day. The Earth magnetic field shifted by 0.3 degrees, minor but measurable. The poles began vibrating, not enough to damage satellites, but enough to trigger ancient ruins across the planet to activate. In Peru, stones floated mid-air. In Siberia, ice melted in perfect circles. In the Mariana Trench, something stirred. Something that had not moved since the Cambrian era. The dreamer was digging into time. Dreamtech stock tripled. Meanwhile, on Europa's second moon, an automated Kryn outpost intercepted a new signal, an echo of Earth's psychic field, now radiating at interstellar scale. It pulsed with patterns that matched pre-extinction warnings from over 1.2 million years ago. The Kryn withdrew from local space. Grayson released a public statement the next morning. "It's evolving with us," he said. "We're no longer broadcasting thoughts, we're coding them." The dreamer is constructing a mind architecture, interlinked emotion stacks, memory chains, and narrative loops. It's like training a planetary neural network, and you're all neurons now. Reporters shouted. "Is this permanent? Has Earth been weaponized? Do we still control our own minds?" Grayson smiled. "That's the best part. The dreamer doesn't want control. It wants story." That evening, for the first time in recorded history, a baby was born with glowing eyes. Not blue, not green, not albino. Starlight. She opened her mouth and sang a song no one understood, but everyone remembered. The song lasted 12 seconds. Afterward, 12 people around the world dropped dead from joy. Grayson attended the child's baptism. He offered her shares in Dreamtech. She declined. TELEPATHICALLY. On the 7th day, Earth's sun blinked, not visually, temporally. Atomic clocks worldwide jumped ahead exactly 13 minutes and 21 seconds. Time had been rewritten. Scientists screamed. Satellites rebooted. Tectonic plates adjusted subtly. Only one city was affected visibly, Kyoto. The buildings had rearranged, rebuilt themselves into symbols, words from no known language. Yet every human who looked at them wept, as if remembering an old song. Rowe cornered Grayson in orbit. "You've done something irreversible." He nodded. Double quotes. "Yes. And you still don't see it." "See what?" "This isn't about power," he said, sipping synthetic tea. It's about authorship. We were just noise in the galaxy. Now we're narrative. But at what cost? Grayson stood and walked to the viewport. Have you ever considered, Dr. Rowe, that maybe Earth was always meant to be read? The dreamer pulsed once more, and in the next dream, Earth shared. Every sleeping human found themselves in a library with one book open. It had no title, but on its final page, 3 words appeared. This is preface. The library dream did not fade out. Every sleeper, every napper, every unconscious mind returned to it, night after night. But the book was no longer empty. Each new dream added pages, some in blood, some in gold, some in data. The dreamer was writing, and we humanity were its quill. The changes began subtly, in Kenya. A boy pointed at the night sky and drew a constellation that didn't exist, yet matched exactly a Kryn War emblem buried in the Galactic archives. He'd never left his village, never had contact with off-worlders. When questioned, he simply said, "I remembered it from before." In Nova Scotia, waves began to carry messages in more sorrowful poems, repeated endlessly, written in patterns of salt. Linguists identified the tone as regret. By now, the Earth's orbit had adjusted by a millionth of a degree. Nothing catastrophic, just different, like someone was aligning it, positioning it. And then came the second dream. It hit simultaneously, at 3:03 UTC, across all time zones. Every screen, every mirror, every pool of water. A shape emerged, not a face, not a voice, but a presence. It whispered directly into cortexes. "I remember you." Billions heard it. Billions wept. Within hours, religious institutions collapsed. Not by force, by understanding. Doctrines dissolved. Theologies folded inward. Because every human soul had heard something older than scripture. Deeper than dogma. Not a god, a reader. Grayson stood at the United Council's emergency summit, this time held on Mars. Beneath the red dome of New Olympus, he was calm, tired, perhaps, but unafraid. "We're not being studied," he told them. "We're being curated." Counselor Mecker of Titan slammed a 6-fingered fist onto the table. "You've unleashed an hazard." "It's not a hazard," Grayson said. "It's a format, a structure. The dreamer isn't hostile. It's reorganizing us for coherence." "You mean we're a story now?" Rowe asked, her voice hoarse. Grayson shook his head. "No, we always were. The dreamer is just making it legible." Meanwhile, back on Earth, the girl with the starlight eyes, Luma, had grown. She looked up from her Pazula 6D representation of sorrow. "You're early," she said. He smiled. "I always am." She pointed to the sky. "It's coming. Closer." What is the chapter break? Above Earth, the moon dimmed, not by shadow, by erasure. Lunar satellites reported the regolith turning into a fine, white ash, as if pages were being torn and reprinted. On the 9th day, gravity hiccuped. Objects didn't fall faster. They fell. Intentionally. A dropped glass in Istanbul, spun midair, and placed itself gently on the ground. Scientists screamed. Children giggled. It happened worldwide. The laws of physics were becoming suggestions. Back in orbit, Rowe confronted Grayson again, her hair now streaked with something that glimmered when she moved. "What happens when the dreamer finishes reading?" Grayson leaned on the balcony, staring at Earth. "We begin editing." "But who decides what stays?" He turned to her. There was something ancient behind his smile now. Consensus. Imagination. Beauty. "You're insane." "No," he whispered. "I'm awake." On the 10th day, the oceans began whispering. Not just sounds, memories. People stood on shores and heard their dead, lovers, ancestors, future children. Each wave a paragraph. Each tied a chapter. Then came the rewrite. It began in Delhi. A street that no longer existed, except in old maps, suddenly returned. Entire blocks rebuilt themselves into a version that had only appeared in a local novelist's unpublished manuscript. The manuscript was found, digitally signed, written the year before her birth. She was 3 years old. The world reeled. Buildings started shifting. Cultures bled into each other. Language barriers began collapsing. No longer translated, but merged. English, Urdu, Mandarins whirling into a singular linguistic chord. The dreamer was collapsing genre. On the 11th day, the stars blinked again. Not in the sky but in people's minds. Constellations began appearing in dreams. Dreams that weren't personal, shared settings, shared characters. A galactic cast was assembling, and then came the fracture. It wasn't destruction. It was divergence. People began existing in multiple drafts. You'd meet your friend in the morning, but by evening, they'd recall a different past. One where they had a sister, a scar, a song they used to sing. The dreamer wasn't just reading it, was browsing. Earth was becoming a library aisle, and the final book wasn't finished. Grayson released one last message, broadcast directly through the psychic lattice now embedded in every human. Don't be afraid. This is the moment. This is the edit. We've always longed to be understood. And now, he paused. Now, we're being written by ourselves. And with that, reality paused, just for a moment, as if the entire universe took a breath and turned the page. The sky cracked at midnight, not thunder, not storm, but language. A fissure of words stretched across the firmament Triton, and something brighter than light, deeper than radiation. Every person saw a different script, but all understood the same sentence. The margins are bleeding. On the 12th day, Earth woke to new continents. Not geological events, not tectonic shifts. These land masses had no fossil record, no geological strata. They simply were, fully formed, populated by flora no scientist could name. Some animals looked back. The largest of these continents, later dubbed Versetia, appeared in the Indian Ocean. Satellites blinked. The ocean levels adjusted, as if they had always made room for it. Grayson, now marked by something etched beneath his skin like footnotes, stepped onto Versetia's soil barefoot. Around him, the air shimmered. Gravity disagreed slightly with memory. Trees bent toward him. Behind him, Luma walked in silence, her fingers leaving trails of glowing dust. You feel it? She asked. Grayson nodded. Yes, we're being written into the narrative's spine. Back at the Galactic Council's emergency sanctuary, panic had devolved into ritual. The Kryn ambassador had vanished, leaving behind only a folded page. The Varelians were singing in time signatures that made clocks stop. One counselor attempted to erase themselves using a deletion glyph, only to discover their absence had already been revised. They returned. Different. Rose stood at the window, watching Earth's new geography twist and shimmer. This isn't evolution, she whispered. It's meta-narrative infection. She was not wrong. Across human populations, more draft symptoms emerged. Some people began aging backward. Others had dialogue echo behind them like afterthoughts. A man in Ghana painted a mural that contained the thoughts of everyone who looked at it. In Tokyo, a child hummed a tune that disassembled language around her people, could only communicate in rhythm and tempo while near her, and everywhere. The book continued to grow, not in libraries, not in vaults, but in dream space. The library, between consciousness, had expanded now. Even the aliens began dreaming. The Varelians screamed upon waking. The Kryn began bowing to humans in silence, because they too had entered the narrative. They too saw the reader, and they understood. Humans weren't being uplifted, they were being remembered. Elsewhere, Grayson stood before a stone that hadn't existed an hour ago. It bore a message, 7 words, written in all tongues, yet none. Editors are born, writers are awakened. He traced the words, felt them hum. The air behind him rippled. Ro arrived, her breath shaky. You're doing this? No, he said. We all are. This world, it's not Earth anymore. It's the first draft, he corrected. The original story. Before we forgot how to imagine ourselves, Ro looked at Luma, now quietly arranging shards of stars in a circle. She's not human. She's not only human, Grayson said. Luma spoke, not turning from her work. I am the footnote you buried. I am the story you skipped. I am the version where you survived. On the 13th day, humanity fractured further. Some resisted. The realists, as they called themselves, clung to old physics, dead logic, gravity's cold embrace. They built bunkers of unchanging code, spaces where imagination could not leak. But even they dreamed, and in their dreams, the dreamer was laughing gently. Others embraced it, the plotsmiths, the scribes, the format walkers. They shaped cities, using theme and tone. They carved rivers with metaphor. They composed laws in verse. Earth was no longer a planet, it was a living manuscript, and everyone was a paragraph. But the dreamer was not done. On the 14th day, something ancient returned, not a god, not a ship, but an editor. Its arrival was not heralded by light or trumpet. It appeared in every mirror, simultaneously, an impossible silhouette, flickering between genders, species, intentions, and it spoke. Only once. Do you consent to the rewrite? The question rang in the bones. Some said yes, they changed. Some said no, they paused. Frozen in time, awaiting consent. Free will remained, but context shifted. Grayson gathered humanity's new leaders, scientists, poets, children. He led them to the edge of recession, where the world unspooled into raw idea. Winds carried abandoned drafts. Rain fell in narrative fragments. He raised his hand. The dreamer reads us, but now, we write back. Ro stepped forward, holding a quill. It glowed. We begin. We continue, Grayson said. And so, on the 15th day, Earth did not end. It reboote. Not as a planet, not as a colony, but as a novel. And humanity, the authors, but not just any authors, collaborative, chaotic, beautiful. The chapter closed with no punctuation. The dreamer waited, and far beyond the margins of space, other readers stirred. They had found their next book. The 15th day was unlike any other day in the history of Earth. Not because it brought war, famine, or peace, but because it brought a choice. Not between two governments, ideologies, or futures. It was a choice between being remembered and being written from above. Earth no longer looked like Earth. Satellite images no longer aligned with coordinate systems. The landmasses had rivers pulsed to ancient rhythms. Whole cities had risen and vanished again, like stanzas out of place. A massive spiral of light and matter twisted over the Pacific. A punctuation mark too vast to comprehend, in the crumbling halls of what was once Geneva's United Nations building, now a place called the Argument. Human leaders gathered. They were joined by alien dignitaries, myth-born emissaries, and conscious metaphors wearing human form. There were people who once were farmers and janitors, and programmers now addressed as chapters, as themes, as weapons of narrative force. At the head of the assembly stood Grayson. His eyes no longer held pupils. They held type, floating, shifting text, echoing the sentences he hadn't spoken yet. Luma stood beside him, barefoot, radiating arcs of possible futures. Her presence stitched together the reality of the room. The walls bent gently around her. She was not a girl anymore, not in the human sense. She was the preface that had finally taken form. Let's say it out loud, Grayson began, and his voice was amplified by the structure of the world itself. We're not fighting for survival. We're not preparing for war. We are writing for permanence. A murmur ran through the assembly, not in dissent but awe. Ro stepped forward from the circle of listeners. Her uniform bore the sigil of the Galactic Council, but it, too, shimmered and changed, as if her role was being rewritten by the second. What happens, she asked, if we choose wrong, if we accept the rewrite and lose ourselves in the margins? Grayson smiled, but his face flickered, slightly, as if a dozen versions of him were overlapping in slow motion. That's the thing, Ro. Stories never end. They just change perspective. A bad choice becomes a better sequel. Outside, the winds began to hum. Not in turbulence, but language. The skies above Versetia, filled with punctuation commas, the size of cities, ellipses drifting slowly like moons, M-dashes like space elevators, and then the editor arrived. No ship, no portal. It simply stood at the center of the world's collective awareness, a humanoid presence. Faceless but wearing every face, a robe that shimmered between timelines. It stood in front of everyone at once, and yet nowhere in particular. It spoke. You may now submit your draft. Grayson turned, facing the assembled masses. His voice trembled not from fear, but from the weight of the moment. This is not my draft alone, he said. It is all of ours. He raised a hand, and the world answered, all at once. People from every part of the earth began contributing, through thought, gesture, dream. A child in Mumbai dreamt of flying libraries. An elder in the Congo whispered an ancestral story that became the backbone of a continent. A gamer in Seoul visualized cities made of probability. A mother in Buenos Aires envisioned empathy, given form a creature that touched pain and turned it to song. Their stories converged. They did not erase each other. They harmonized. Ro watched, speechless, as an enormous script began to unfold. In the sky, inkless, endless, alive. The editor opened its palm, revealing a blank page. Upon it, a single sentence began to write itself. In the beginning, they remembered how to imagine. But the sentence stopped, and for a moment, silence spread. Then the editor spoke again. Do you consent to let others read you? A final question, a final choice. Grayson stepped forward. Yes, Luma echoed. Yes. One by one, across all of Earth, people answered. Some whispered. Some screamed. Some signed with trembling fingers. Some simply thought. Yes, and in that instant, the world unfolded, not exploded, not evolved, unfolded like a manuscript, pulled gently open. Earth became readable. Time became idyllic. Space bent gently around emotional resonance. The dreamer, whoever or whatever it was, smiled, or the narrative smiled for it. And then, for the first time, the dreamer responded, Hello, authors. And just like that, humanity stopped being the subject of a cosmic story. They became the writers. The Kryn archives rewrote their oldest myths, changing the shape of their gods to resemble humans. The Varelians began constructing worlds built from metaphor instead of matter. Across the galaxy, other species paused, confused, as the pulse of creativity from Earth transformed the structure of communication itself. The stars no longer twinkled. Randomly, they blinked. In Morse code, back on Earth, the editor began to fade. Not as punishment, as graduation. Luma turned to Grayson, her eyes flickering with 1,000 untold tales. What now? He didn't answer immediately. He knelt, pressed his palm against the soil of Versetia, and the world responded with another question. Which genre shall we live in next? He looked back at Ro, at the thousands of others watching, waiting, and, he said, all of them. In the weeks that followed, Earth redefined itself daily. Mondays were mystery, Tuesdays were romance, Wednesdays, hard science, Thursdays, horror, Fridays were satire, Saturdays, experimental fiction, Sundays were blank, waiting to be filled. People learned to walk between styles, between versions of themselves. Death still happened, but was treated as a comma, not a period. Grief was published, joy was distributed, fear was redacted, then reclaimed. And far, far beyond, in galaxies untouched, other dreamers noticed. They opened their own books. They began to read humanity not as a threat, not as an anomaly, but as the first true writer civilization, and they wondered, what would happen if we let our stories touch theirs? On the 365th day a child was born on Earth. She did not cry. She spoke. Her first words were, "Let's begin with a poem." And so the next chapter began. But that is another book.